The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden hue across the peaceful landscape. It was early spring, and the earth, still cool from the winter's embrace, seemed to awaken slowly, stretching beneath the tender rays of light. A soft breeze stirred the leaves, sending gentle whispers through the trees. The village was still wrapped in the warmth of dawn, its silence broken only by the distant chirping of birds, heralding the day's beginning. As Elias stepped out into the garden, he was greeted by the delicate scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. The ground beneath his feet was soft and damp, a lingering memory of the rain that had passed through the night before. The air was cool, but had a hint of sweetness, like the promise of something new. All around him, life was quietly stirring. Tiny buds, hidden in the branches of the trees, began to show their faces, reaching toward the sky with the faintest touch of green. Flowers, their colors soft but vibrant, peeked through the earth, their petals still delicate, waiting for the warmth of the sun to fill them. It was in this tranquil, delicate moment that the world seemed to stand still, allowing Elias to breathe, deeply taking in the beauty of the simple things around him. The grass underfoot, the soft rustling of the wind through the branches, the way the light fell just right across the landscape, these were the things that spoke to him now. For the first time in what seemed like ages, he found himself pausing, not rushing forward, but simply absorbing the world in front of him. There was something different about today, something that felt right, something that made the slow, steady change of the seasons feel like a slow exhale of peace in the distance. The trees began to sway gently, their branches weaving in the wind. The birds, now more awake, began their songs soft at first, almost hesitant, but as the sun rose higher, their songs grew fuller, warmer, carrying with them the promise of spring. The earth was speaking, and in its quiet way, it was telling Elias that change was coming. The cold grip of winter was slowly retreating, making way for the warm embrace of spring. And in this quiet, humble garden, everything felt in perfect balance. The garden had its own rhythm, a pace that was different from the bustling world beyond the gates of the village, a rhythm that seemed to reflect Elias' own quiet longing for peace and contentment. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the sun's warmth to bathe his face. It was not the harsh heat of midday, but the soft, welcoming warmth of a new beginning, the promise of the season ahead, a season of growth, of renewal, was in the air, waiting to unfold. Just like the buds on the trees and the flowers in the ground. For Elias, it felt like the beginning of something more profound than the simple change of seasons. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where the noise of the world could be softened by the quiet beauty of nature. As the days passed, Elias felt the slow shift from spring's gentle embrace to the bold, passionate warmth of summer. The garden, once quiet and subdued, now hummed with life. The roses, delicate and reserved in their early bloom, had grown fuller, their colors deepening to the rich crimson of a setting sun. The one school breeze of the morning had been replaced by a soft, warm wind that kissed the skin like a gentle touch, filling the air with the scent of blooming flowers, fresh earth, and the promise of abundance. Elias spent more time outside now, basking in the heat of the sun as it poured down over the village. Each morning he rose early to take in the sunrise, marveling at how the golden light seemed to transform everything it touched. The garden was now bursting with color, tulips, daisies, and the first vibrant green tendrils of ivy climbing the fence. The trees were thick with leaves, their branches swaying lightly in the warm breeze, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The birds that had greeted the dawn in soft chirps were now full of song, their voices carrying through the air, almost as if the world were singing in celebration of life itself. For Elias, summer was no longer just a season. It had become a metaphor for everything he had longed for: fulfillment, growth, vitality. The world around him seemed alive in a way it never had before. The energy of summer mirrored his own changing heart. What once seemed like an endless search for meaning, for a deeper purpose, now felt like it was coming into focus. Each new day held the possibility of something grand, and the weight of his old discontent began to melt away beneath the warmth of the sun. Yet even in the heat of summer, Elias began to feel a quiet stirring in his soul, a yearning that he hadn't been able to name before. It wasn't a longing for something distant or unattainable, but rather a deep sense of appreciation for the present moment. He had always believed that he would find happiness in far-off places, in grand achievements, or in the validation of others. But now, in the fullness of summer's embrace, he was beginning to realize that true joy wasn't something to be chased. It was something to be felt in the stillness of the moment, in the vibrancy of life as it unfolded around him. One afternoon, as Elias sat beneath the shade of the oak tree in the garden, he noticed the subtle changes in the world. The bees, busy with their endless work, buzzed by him with purpose, their wings a soft hum in the still air. The leaves above him rustled gently, whispering secrets of the world beyond. Everything seemed so connected, so harmonious. In the past, Elias had been too preoccupied with his own desires to notice such things, too consumed with his internal struggles to appreciate the simple yet profound beauty of nature. It was in this moment that he realized something truly remarkable. The world had not changed. It was he who had changed. The seasons, with their ebb and flow, had always been here, always in motion. But it was only now, in the embrace of summer, that he was truly present, truly attuned to the rhythm of life. Summer had become more than just a time of growth, was a time of awakening, of becoming aware of the life that was unfolding in every corner of the world. And within himself, as the last vestiges of summer faded, Elias felt the subtle shift in the air. The heat that had once embraced him with such enthusiasm began to wane, replaced by the crisp, invigorating chill of autumn. The garden, too, began its own quiet transformation, the vibrant greens of summer fading into the warm, earthy hues of amber and gold. Elias couldn't help but notice the slow but undeniable beauty of this change, the way the leaves slowly turned from green to shades of fiery orange, deep red, and warm brown. Autumn had arrived, and with it came the kind of quiet reflection that Elias had been avoiding for so long. The change in the air was not just physical, but emotional. Elias had spent so many years caught up in the fast-paced rush of life, never pausing to truly examine what lay beneath the surface of his days. Summer had been a time of exuberance, of outward energy and growth, but autumn invited him to slow down, to look inward, and to acknowledge the passing of time. It was in the rustling of the fallen leaves, in the fading light of the afternoon, that Elias began to realize that the world around him, much like his own life, was always in flux. The natural world's transitions from the vigor of summer to the slowing down of autumn, his own journey, he began to spend more time sitting in the garden, observing the changes. The once bustling flowers now appeared more still, their petals beginning to droop as the nights grew colder. Yet Elias found beauty in the way everything seemed to prepare for the quiet that would follow. The flowers, although in the process of fading, held an elegance in their final moments. The trees, now bare in parts, stood tall against the sky, their branches bare but strong, reaching out like arms that had weathered countless seasons. As he sat beneath the now bare oak tree, the one that had sheltered him during the warmer months, Elias couldn't help but think about his own life. How much of it had been spent chasing after something that was always just out of reach? How many days had he spent worrying about the future, unable to truly live in the moment? Autumn had come to him not only with its cool winds and golden light, but with the realization that the passage of time was something to be honored, not feared. He thought about the people who had come and gone in his life, those who had shaped him into who he was today. In the quiet of autumn, with the air tinged with the scent of earth and falling leaves, Elias felt a deep sense of gratitude for the past. There were parts of him that he had once wanted to forget, the disappointments, the mistakes, the losses. Now, in the presence of autumn's wisdom, he understood that all those experiences were part of the same beautiful journey. Every moment, every person had led him here, to this quiet understanding that life was not a race to an unattainable end, but a series of small, meaningful moments that came together to create a story. Elias spent hours contemplating the beauty of the world around him, thinking about his journey from youth to adulthood and the lessons he had learned along the way. The vibrant, colorful landscape before him mirrored the rich memories of his life, the bright, bold moments of joy and success, but also the muted hues of sadness and loss. But now, in the quiet peace of autumn, he began to see how all these colors, these contrasts, were necessary. Just as the garden could not thrive without the changing seasons, so too could his life not have flourished without its ups and downs. Autumn, with its mellow light and peaceful cadence, invited Elias to reflect on what he had gained, not just in terms of accomplishments, but in wisdom. It was as if the season had whispered to him that the true meaning of life was found not in the endless pursuit of more, but in the quiet moments of acceptance. The world would continue to change. Nothing in nature stood still. But that didn't mean he had to rush ahead with it. The leaves fell slowly, gently, but in their fall they made room for the next chapter. So, too, could he allow space in his heart for the next phase of his life. One crisp afternoon, Elias wandered through the village, his coat buttoned tightly against the cool air, and noticed the signs of the harvest season. The fields were lined with bales of hay, the scent of freshly baked bread wafting from the bakery, and the warmth of people gathering together, preparing for the long winter ahead. It was a time for slowing down, for coming together, and for reflecting. He saw the elderly man from the bakery waving from the window, the same man who had shared his wisdom about finding beauty in the simple things, and he felt a deep sense of connection with him. Life, Elias realized, was about sharing these quiet moments with others, about creating memories that would last long after the seasons had changed. As he walked back to the garden, Elias noticed that the sunlight was softer now, casting longer shadows as it dipped lower in the sky. There was a beauty in this twilight hour, in the way the world seemed to slow down and embrace its own inevitable transformation. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt at peace with the passing of time. He no longer feared it. Instead, he welcomed it, knowing that each season, each phase of life held its own unique beauty, its own quiet wisdom, as the last leaves of autumn fluttered gently to the ground. Elias could feel the weight of the coming winter, a season that was both a quiet end and a hopeful beginning. The air grew sharper, the winds colder, yet there was a certain serenity in the stillness that winter brought. It was as though the earth itself had drawn a deep, restful breath, pausing for the first time in months, seemed to be waiting, anticipating a time of renewal that would eventually come with the arrival of spring. But for now, winter had a hold on the land, and Elias welcomed its stillness. He spent more time indoors now, seeking warmth by the hearth, wrapped in blankets, feeling the heat from the fire as it crackled and popped. The flames flickered and danced, casting long shadows across the room, creating a comforting contrast to the cold that lingered just beyond the windows. Elias found himself staring into the fire, mesmerized by its rhythmic dance. There was something both soothing and hypnotic about the flames. Its endless movement was an embodiment of nature's cycle, a gentle reminder that everything in life was connected, flowing in and out of seasons, ever changing, ever growing, and eventually returning to rest. As the days shortened and the nights grew longer, Elias's thoughts turned inward. He began to reflect on the past year, on everything he had experienced, and on the lessons that life had gently taught him. The passing of time no longer felt like a burden to him. It had become a cherished companion, one that guided him through the ebbs and flows of his life. The rush of the earlier seasons, spring's new beginnings, summer's intensity, and autumn's reflection had now given way to winter's quiet calm. Winter, Elias realized, was a time for rest and rejuvenation, not just for nature, but for the soul as well. Each night, after the last embers of the fire had burned low, Elias would walk to the window where he could see the village beneath a blanket of snow. The streets were still, and the houses, with their smoke rising from chimneys, looked like quiet refuges against the harshness of winter. The world outside seemed so peaceful, so at ease, wrapped in the deep silence of the season. But within, that silence was a promise, quiet and unspoken. Winter might bring stillness, but it also carried the seeds of new beginnings, of growth that would soon break through the frozen earth. One evening, Elias decided to venture out, drawn by the allure of the snow. It was late, the moon high in the sky, casting a soft, silver light across the village. The snow, freshly fallen, was crisp beneath his feet, the sound of each step muffled by the thick blanket of frost. The village, though quiet, was alive with a kind of gentle energy. The air felt pure, clean, as if it had been swept of all the noise and haste of the world, leaving only the essential. Elias looked up at the sky, his breath forming tiny clouds in the cold air, and he felt a deep connection to the universe, to the infinite stretch of time that had passed and would continue to pass, beyond the span of his own life. For the first time, Elias understood the importance of winter, not just as a season of rest, but as a time to reconnect with the essence of life itself. The quiet offered clarity, and the stillness allowed him to listen to himself, to the world around him, and to the rhythm of the natural world. It was in winter's cold silence that he found a deep peace, a peace that filled him, that calmed his mind and soothed his soul. The days grew colder, and yet Elias felt warmth in his heart that he hadn't known before. The fire inside him, once so eager and restless, had calmed, and now he embraced the stillness, the quiet that came with winter's arrival. The world outside might have been frozen, but inside, Elias was growing. He had learned that rest was as necessary as action, that silence could be just as rich as sound, and that the beauty of life was not just in the peaks of joy, but also in the valleys of introspection and peace. He had come to realize that life, much like the seasons, was not meant to be rushed. Each phase had its purpose. Each season, each chapter was essential. And in winter's quietude, he finally felt ready to embrace the next phase of his journey. For winter was not an end, but the fertile ground of rebirth. The first signs of spring might not be visible yet, but Elias knew they were there, waiting, just beneath the surface, ready to bloom once again. As the days passed and winter's chill grew deeper, Elias found himself in a state of peaceful reflection. The earth around him lay still under its blanket of snow, but within him, the quiet energy of the season stirred softly, like the slow, steady beat of a heart resting before it begins to beat again. The long nights, when the world seemed to sleep, under the stars, allowed his thoughts to wander, not with the restlessness of the past, but with a calm understanding that he had finally found his place. Time itself seemed to stretch before him, not as a hurried, fleeting thing, but as a gentle stream, slowly flowing from one moment to the next. The idea that everything in life each season, each cycle was interconnected, began to sink deeper into his consciousness. He remembered the vibrant, passionate days of summer, and how, at the time, he had yearned for something more. Then autumn had come, bringing with it the quiet contemplation of life's passage. And now, as winter's embrace held the world in its soft grip, Elias realized that each season was not just a stage to be lived through, but an essential part of the whole journey. Winter wasn't the end. It was a necessary part of the cycle, just as important as the bloom of spring or the richness of summer. He understood now that the quiet moments were just as significant as the loud ones. One evening, when the snow fell gently outside and the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Elias felt a deep connection to all that had come before him, the generations who had lived and loved in this village, the ancestors who had walked the same paths, breathed the same air, the stories of his family, his village, and even the lives of those who had long since passed came to him in flashes, moments of joy, of sorrow, of love, and of loss. The ancient oak tree in the garden, the rose that had once bloomed, the house that had stood here for generations, all of these things were woven into the fabric of the life he had come to cherish. Through his eyes, the world was no longer divided into past, present, and future. It was one continuous thread, each moment leading seamlessly into the next, connected by invisible hands. The seasons, with their inevitable changes, were part of this thread, reminding him that no part of life was insignificant and no moment was ever truly lost. The present, he now understood, was not separate from the past or the future, but part of an unbroken circle of life that continued with each passing season. Each passing day, Elias stepped outside once again, this time not to escape into the world, but to step deeper into himself. The cold air kissed his skin, sharp and clear, but the night was calm. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its silver light across the snow-covered fields, the same light that had illuminated the world for centuries. The village, quiet and still beneath the sky, felt timeless. In the distance, the faint murmur of a dog barking could be heard, but otherwise all was hushed. Elias stood in the silence, feeling the weight of history in his bones, the pulse of the earth beneath his feet. It was as though the village itself held its breath, waiting for something, waiting for him to understand. The world around him had not changed. It was he who had changed. He was no longer searching for something outside himself. He had discovered the beauty of life in the moments that had always been present, but which he had once overlooked. It was the quiet moments in between the noise, the simplicity of life in its purest form, that had become his greatest joy. The love of the people around him, the comfort of the earth beneath him, and the peace of the seasons moving in their endless cycle had all become his truth. Elias turned back toward the house, the quiet warmth beckoning him inside as he passed. By the garden one last time that evening, he glanced at the place where the rose had once bloomed. It was now a symbol of his own growth, a representation of his ability to embrace each season as it came, without rushing or resisting. Life, much like the rose, would continue to bloom, fade, and return, each season marking its own special place in the cycle. The world around him might have appeared still, but within him, Elias felt alive in a way he had never known before. In the stillness of winter, he had learned to live with acceptance, to cherish the present moment, and to honor the cycles of life. The unbroken circle of time of life had unfolded before him, and in it he found peace. As the earth began to thaw, and the first whisper of spring crept through the stillness of winter, Elias felt a stirring deep within him, an almost imperceptible hum, as though life itself was waking up again. The morning sunlight, softer than it had been in months, began to stretch across the land, spilling warmth over the once frozen soil. It was a quiet, gentle warmth, not the hurried embrace of summer, but a tender touch, coaxing life back into the world. The air was filled with the fresh, earthy scent of the ground as it softened and began to breathe again. The trees, still bare but promising, stood tall in the garden, their branches quivering slightly as the first buds began to form, delicate and unsure. Elias had not expected it, but the coming of spring felt different this time. He no longer looked at the changing season with the eager anticipation he once had, as though it were a final answer to a long-held question, with the quiet steadiness of a new cycle. The ground beneath his feet, the trees beginning to bud, the faint scent of flowers on the brisette was as if the earth itself was whispering secrets to him. Elias wandered into the garden, no longer rushing, but allowing the world to unfold at its own pace. He no longer measured the passage of time by the frantic need to achieve, but by the quiet moments of connection he felt with the earth and its rhythms. The flowers that began to bloom, the violets, the lilacs, and the tiny daffodils felt like old friends, returning once again after a long absence. They were humble flowers, their petals delicate but strong. In its infinite wisdom, knew how to begin again, how to find strength in the gentleness of new beginnings. He noticed the birds, too, returning from their long migration, their songs filling the air with a joy that seemed to awaken something in him. The chirping of the sparrows, the soft cooing of the doves, of hope and of life's resilience. Elias had once believed that spring was simply the end of winter, the thawing of the cold, but now he saw it as something more profound, a celebration of life's ability to rise again, of nature's unyielding determination to return, no matter how long the night had seemed. In the stillness of the garden, Elias began to understand that life's most important moments weren't always the loudest or most obvious ones. The quiet renewal of spring, the soft return of the earth to its former glory, was as powerful as the most thunderous storm. It was in the quiet unfolding of nature, in the gentle return of the world to life, that true beauty lay. The seasons didn't rush, and neither did Elias. The rebirth of spring reminded him that growth, change, and healing happened not all at once, but little by little, day by day. The more Elias observed the world around him, the way the flowers hesitated before fully blooming, the way the birds returned and cautiously tested the air, the more he realized that he, too, was part of this natural cycle. His own growth had not been linear or swift. There had been pauses, moments of stillness, times when he had retreated inward, but these moments had been as necessary as the bursts of energy he had once sought. Just as the earth took its time to regenerate, Elias had learned to take his own time to rest, to reflect, and to heal at his own pace. One morning, as he stood by the window, watching the sunlight pour over the garden, Elias felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. It was the kind of peace that came not from knowing all the answers, but from knowing that everything, in its own time, would unfold. The seasons, the garden, the world around him all were moving toward something greater, something eternal. And in this moment, Elias felt as though he, too, was part of this grand, unspoken rhythm. He was not separate from the world, again drawn to the rose that had first captured his attention months ago. It was still small, delicate, but its buds were now unmistakably forming, the promise of its full bloom already evident. Elias bent down to take a closer look, and in the soft blush of the petals he saw something new, a sense of anticipation, a quiet waiting. It was not just a flower waiting to bloom, but a symbol of all the possibilities that lay ahead. He knew, as he touched its soft petals, that his own journey, too, was unfolding. The quiet beauty of the rose mirrored the quiet beauty of his own growth. As the days continued to stretch longer and the air grew warmer, Elias found himself caught in a quiet, reflective solitude. Each day the garden seemed to beckon him more, urgently, not with the harsh brightness of summer, but with the soft, inviting glow of spring. The world was reborn, and so too was he. The flowers that had once been buds, shyly peeking out from the soil, now bloomed in full color, their petals unfurled slowly, as if they, too, were learning how to exist in the world. Elias watched them with a quiet admiration, marveling at how something so fragile could be so resilient, just as he had learned to be. The garden was no longer just a space filled with plants. It had become a living, breathing testament to the cycle of life. It was a place of growth, yes, but also of understanding. As the flowers opened to the sun, so too did Elias's heart. He had spent so much of his life searching for something, anything that would bring him fulfillment. But now, standing in the middle of this vibrant world, he realized that what he had been seeking had always been here, around him. It had always been part of him, just waiting to emerge. The once barren tree in the corner of the garden, which had appeared so lifeless just a few months ago, was now covered in tender green leaves. It seemed to pulse with life, its branches reaching toward the sky in a silent but powerful prayer. Elias stood beneath it one evening, the cool breeze ruffling his hair as he looked up at the sky, now painted in shades of pink and orange as the sun set behind the hills. He thought about how the tree, much like him, had patiently waited for its moment to grow. It had endured the winter, its leaves fallen and its branches bare, but now it was alive again. And just as the tree had emerged from the quiet of winter, so, too, had he found himself emerging from the stillness of his own soul. The peace of spring had seeped into his bones, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt fully present in his own life. There was no longer a sense of rushing, of always needing to be somewhere else, or doing something else. Spring had taught him that being still, being present, was a form of living. It was not a passive waiting, but an active awareness. He had spent so much of his life looking outward, seeking answers in faraway places, in accomplishments and accolades. But now, in the quietude of the garden, between his life and the world around him, the sky, the trees, the flowers, all of them part of the same cycle, all of them growing, changing, and evolving. Just as the garden had flourished under the gentle touch of spring, so too had he begun to flourish within himself. The impatience that had once consumed him, the constant hunger for something more. There was no need for him to chase after anything. Everything he needed was here, in the moments of stillness, in the soft unfolding of life itself. The flowers around him seemed to be speaking without words, their delicate petals swaying in the breeze, as if they, too, understood the beauty of simply existing. Elias reached out and touched one of the blossoms, feeling the soft, velvety texture of its petals against his fingertips. It was a simple, yet profound gesture, a recognition of the connection between himself and the earth. He had been too busy, for too long, too distracted by the noise of the world. But now, in the serenity of spring, he felt as though he had finally found his place within it all. As the evening wore on and the stars began to appear in the sky, Elias found a deep sense of gratitude for the quiet transformation that was unfolding in his life. He realized that this was what he had been searching for all along, not an external destination, but an internal awakening. The world around him was changing, and so was he. The seasons had taught him that change was not something to fear, but to embrace. Just as the flowers bloomed in their own time, so, too, would he continue to grow at his own pace. In his own time, Elias sat down on the bench beneath the oak tree, the soft rustle of the leaves above him soothing his mind. The cool air wrapped. The rustle of the wind through the trees created a symphony of peace. It was in this moment, in the quiet, gentle embrace of nature, that he truly understood the power of presence. He did not need to search for happiness or fulfillment outside of himself. It was already here, in the small, quiet moments of life. And as spring continued to unfold around him, Elias knew that he, too, was part of this ever-changing, ever-growing world, and he was finally at peace with that, as the first tender rays of spring sunlight began to stretch across the garden. Elias felt a subtle shift within himself and awareness that had been growing almost imperceptibly over the past months. The cycles of nature, once something he had observed from a distance, now seemed to speak directly to him. Spring had brought the promise of new beginnings, but as the seasons began to change once again, Elias realized that these shifts weren't just about the world outside, but about the way he understood his place in it. The changing of the seasons, from the awakening of spring to the stillness of winter. Morning dew glistened on the petals of the flowers, catching the light like tiny jewels. The sound of birds chirping echoed through the air, their songs weaving in and out of the gentle breeze. Elias stood in the center of the garden, taking in the peaceful symphony around him. His heart felt full, not in the way that it once had, when he searched for happiness outside himself, but in a more profound and lasting way. This quiet acceptance was the gift that spring had given him. He thought back to the harsh winters of his past, the moments of darkness and despair that had once seemed endless. Winter had not been a time of merely waiting for something better, but a time of preparation, a time when everything was still, silent, but also full of potential. The earth had been resting, waiting for spring to come. And in the same way, Elias had been resting, allowing himself to heal, to reflect, and to grow. The realization came to him slowly, like the gradual blooming of the first flower in the garden. And as spring unfolded around him, he knew that this was not just a season for plants to grow, but a season for his own soul to flourish as he walked through the garden, his fingers brushing lightly against the soft petals of the flowers. Elias felt a deep connection to the world around him. Each flower, each tree, each blade of grass was a part of something greater, a larger cycle that had been moving long before he had come into this world, and would continue long after he was gone. Peace. He was not separate from this world, not apart from the cycles of life. He was a part of it, a piece of the puzzle that was always changing, always evolving, and always moving forward. There. And in that cycle, there was no end, only transformation. The trees would shed their leaves again in the fall, the flowers would wither and die, and the cold of winter would return. But each cycle was followed by another, each one bringing new growth, new life, and new wisdom. And Elias, with each passing day, was becoming part of that cycle. The more Elias reflected on this, the more he understood the beauty of life's impermanence. Life, in all its fleeting moments, was beautiful precisely because it was constantly changing, constantly moving forward. Just as the seasons could not be rushed, neither could his own life be hurried. Each moment, each season, was a step in a greater journey, one that he could not control, but one that he could learn to embrace with grace. Standing in the garden, began to set. The light, gentle and warm, cast a soft glow across the world. The trees swayed lightly in the breeze, the flowers rustled quietly, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt at peace with the passage of time. The seasons would continue, the cycles would persist, and through it all, he would continue to grow, to learn, and to live accepting as the earth did. Each change with open arms as summer unfolded. Elias found himself walking deeper into the world around him, yet still. There was a quietness in his soulless stillness that only seemed to grow stronger as the days grew warmer and longer. The sun now hung high in the sky, casting its golden glow across the landscape, and the earth beneath his feet hummed with the vibrant energy of life. Yet Elias didn't feel hurried by it. He moved slowly, almost reverently, through the gardens he had come to cherish, watching as the plants and flowers blossomed in their full glory. The one-stender buds had opened wide, their colors bold and vibrant, as though the earth itself was celebrating its own beauty. And with each passing day, the world around him seemed to bloom more brilliantly than ever before. But the real change within Elias wasn't in the outward world at all. It was within him, growing steadily, like the flowers that had come to life around him. He felt no rush now, no urgency to chase after fleeting goals. He had learned that life was not about accumulation or constant movement, but about presence, about being still enough to absorb the moments that would otherwise slip by unnoticed. The rustling of the leaves, the soft hum of bees moving from flower to flower, the quiet flutter of bird wings as they soared above all these simple things now seemed so profound, so full of meaning. The world, once something he tried to control or understand through action, was now something he sought to experience through presence. There were still moments when the past came to him, memories of old regrets, fleeting desires, things left undone, but now they didn't carry the weight they once had. They were just moments in time, like the gentle whispers of the wind, passing through him without leaving a mark. He didn't feel the need to cling to them anymore. He could see them for what they were: lessons, experiences, and growth. They were as much a part of him as the flowers that bloomed each year, just waiting for the right moment to come into their full beauty. As Elias sat in the shade of the oak tree one warm afternoon, the cool breeze lifting his hair from his forehead, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He felt the rhythm of life all around him, the pulse of the earth, the rise and fall of the seasons, the way time moved forward even when it seemed to stand still. And for the first time he felt truly in tune with it, as though he was no longer just a bystander, but an active participant in the unfolding of his own story. The quiet understanding of his place in the world washed over him. He had spent so many years searching for purpose, for fulfillment, but now, sitting in the embrace of the warm summer day, he realized that his purpose had always been here within him. It wasn't something to find in the future, nor something he could acquire through external achievements. His purpose was in the way he lived each day, in the quiet acts of gratitude, in the moments of stillness, and in the love he had for the simple beauty around him. The flowers, the trees, the sky, everything was a part of this great, once so restless and searching, now beat in rhythm with the world. He had come to understand that true fulfillment was not in chasing after something outside of himself, but in recognizing that everything he needed was already here. The lessons had been whispered to him by the earth, by the seasons, by the very air he breathed. Life, in all its imperfection and beauty, was enough. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, sadness at its passing. Instead, he felt a deep, peaceful satisfaction, as though he had been part of something much larger than himself. And in that quiet moment, as the day faded into night, He realized that he was exactly where he needed to be, just as the earth, the trees, and the flowers were exactly where they needed to be. Life, in all its cycles, was perfect in its own way, and so was he. As the seasons continued their slow, inevitable march toward autumn, Elias felt an even deeper peace settle within him. The once restless yearning he had felt, the endless searching for meaning, had softened. No longer did he look at the world with a sense of urgency, of needing to achieve or reach some far-off goal. Instead, he embraced the quiet unfolding of each moment, allowing life to come to him as naturally as the fall of the leaves or the drift of the wind. The world around him had grown more expansive, yet he had grown smaller within it, not in the sense of being insignificant, but in the way that a single drop of water becomes one with the vast ocean. He had become aware of the greater rhythm of the universe, the pulse of time that moved beyond the confines of his individual life. He had learned, as the trees had learned, that there was no need to rush or struggle against the flow. The seasons came and went, the tides of life rose and fell, but the essential nature of everything remained unchanged, always interconnected, always whole. On an evening when the air was crisp with the first hints of autumn's chill, Elias stood by the garden, watching as the golden light of the setting sun washed over the earth. The flowers, once bright and full of life, now stood in their final glory, their colors muted but still beautiful. The garden, like him, had come to a point of quiet acceptance. No longer did it strive for the brightness of spring or the fullness of summer. Now it stood in quiet dignity, knowing that it had played its part in the circle of life. It had bloomed, it had flourished, and now it would rest. It was the natural cycle, the same cycle that Elias was now a part of in the distance. The first signs of autumn were becoming more evident. The leaves on the trees began to turn shades of amber and gold, their delicate beauty now heightened by the fading light of the sun. Elias watched, his gaze lingering on the horizon, where the sky met the earth in a perfect, unbroken line. He realized, as he had never before, that he had always been connected to this eternal flow, this unbroken circle of life. The seasons, the sun, the stars, they were not separate from him, but a reflection of the rhythm within his own soul. It was then that Elias understood that the cycles of nature were not just external, they were internal as well. The way that flowers bloomed and faded, the way the trees shed their leaves to prepare for the quiet of winter, these were the same rhythms that governed his life. He had once feared the passing of time, dreading the inevitable shifts that came with each new season of life. But now, standing in the garden, with the soft evening light wrapping around him, he understood that these shifts were not to be feared. They were to be embraced. Autumn was now settling in, its cool touch caressing the earth, and Elias felt as though he, too, was entering a new phase of his life. It was not a phase of decline, as he might have once feared, but of quiet wisdom, the wisdom of the earth, of the seasons, of the natural world that moved in its own time, in its own way. It was a wisdom that taught him that rest was as important as growth, that reflection was as necessary as action, and that peace was as valuable as excitement. The quiet beauty of autumn mirrored the quiet wisdom that had settled in his heart. And just as the earth would rest before the return of spring, so too would he rest, knowing that he was part of something greater, something eternal. The sun had set, leaving behind a soft glow in the sky, and Elias stood there, taking it all in. He felt a deep gratitude for the life he had lived, for the lessons he had learned, and for the peace he had found. He had come to understand that life was not about rushing forward, but about moving with the rhythm of the world, with the flow of the seasons. There would be more seasons, more chapters, but for now, in this quiet moment, he was content. He was at peace with himself, with the world, and with the endless cycle of life. As he turned to go back into the house, Elias felt the coolness of the evening air on his skin, a reminder that winter was approaching. But unlike before, he no longer feared the cold. He had learned that the cold, like the heat of summer, was simply another part of the natural cycle. And in its quiet, still beauty, there was a sense of peace that he had never before known. He walked back to the warmth of the house, his heart light, his mind clear. The journey of life, with all its seasons, had taught him one final, beautiful truth, that life, in all its forms, was perfect in its imperfection. As the first chill of winter settled in, the landscape around Elias transformed once again. The once vibrant colors of autumn had faded into a pale, crisp stillness, and the garden, which had once been full of life and movement, was now a quiet, frozen memory. Elias, too, felt the shift within himself, final resting of the busy thoughts that had once driven him. The world around him seemed to have quieted as well, each sound softened by the thick blanket of snow that now covered the earth. There was something sacred in this stillness, something that Elias had never before fully appreciated. The cold, sharp air, the quiet of the snowflakes falling, the peacefulness of the long nights, these were all gifts, silent invitations too. Pause and simply exist in the moment. For the first time in many years, Elias found himself comfortable in the stillness. In the past, he had always feared the silence, the quiet that seemed to separate him from the world. But now he saw it differently. Winter, with its cold and its silence, was not a time of loss, but a time of reflection, of preparation. The earth rested beneath its snowy blanket, not in death, but in anticipation of the rebirth that would come in spring. The trees, bare and stark, stood as quiet sentinels against the sky, their branches reaching up as though to touch the stars. Elias, too, had come to rest. He no longer sought the noise of the world to fill him, for he had learned that silence too had its own richness. Each day, Elias woke to the crisp air, the quiet that enveloped him, and the stillness of the world outside. He spent his days walking through the snowy landscape, his footsteps leaving prints in the fresh snow that would soon be covered again. The world was always in motion, even when it appeared to be still. The trees, though bare, were still alive, their roots deep within the earth, drawing strength for the coming season. The birds had gone, and the animals that roamed the land had tucked themselves away in their burrows, resting until spring. Yet Elias felt no loneliness in the silence, only a deep sense of connection to the world around him. The quiet of winter had become his companion, his teacher. There was something sacred in the stillness of winter, something that had always been there, waiting for him to notice. Elias had spent so much of his life seeking answers, rushing from one moment to the next, always moving forward, never stopping to truly listen to the world. But now, in the quiet of winter, he understood that the answers were always there. He had simply needed to slow down and listen. The earth, the trees, the snowflakes, the wind, all of it spoke to him in ways he had never heard before. The silence was not empty. It was full of wisdom, full of life. One night, as Elias stood outside, gazing up at the stars, he felt a profound sense of peace settle within him. The sky was clear, the stars bright and sparkling like diamonds scattered across the velvet dark. The silence of the world seemed to stretch infinitely, as though the entire universe was holding its breath. And in that moment, Elias realized that he was a part of something far greater than himself, a vast, unbroken circle that stretched across time and space. The seasons, the earth, the stars, they were all connected, and he too was a part of it. He had come to understand that his life, too, was a part of this great, eternal cycle. He was no longer a solitary being, struggling to find his place. He had found his place, not in the rush of the world, but in the quiet, steady rhythm of life itself. Elias smiled, a deep, peaceful smile that came from the knowledge that he had found what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't a grand achievement, nor an external goal. It was the simple acceptance of the world as it was, of the life that had unfolded before him. The beauty of the stars above, the stillness of the snow-covered earth, and the quiet beating of his own heart. Of these were a part of the same wondrous dance of existence. And for the first time in his life, Elias felt at peace with it. He no longer needed to seek out the answers. They were all here, within him, within the world around him. The stillness of winter had taught him that sometimes the most profound truths were found not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet moments between. As winter continued its gentle reign over the land, Elias felt his heart become one with the seasons. The cold no longer felt harsh or unwelcome. It had become a companion, a quiet presence in his life, one that held the wisdom of rest and renewal. The days, though short and the nights long, had become his moments of reflection, of peaceful solitude. He no longer longed for the warmth of summer or the busy hustle of spring. He had learned to savor the stillness, to find beauty in the quiet moments that each season brought, in the gentle snow, the crisp air, the soft rustling of the bare branches. Elias discovered a peace that came from knowing that he was, at last, living in tune with the natural flow of the world. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of lavender and gold, Elias sat by the window, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape. The world outside seemed still, untouched by time, and yet he felt the pulse of life in every inch of it. The trees stood solemnly against the sky, their branches etched in silhouette, the ground beneath them blanketed in soft, silent snow. The distant mountains, their peaks dusted with snow, were bathed in the soft, fading light of the day. Everything seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something yet unseen. And in that stillness, Elias found himself at peace with the unknown, with the mystery of life, and with the knowledge that everything would unfold in its own time, as it always had. The quiet was not empty. It was full of life, full of wisdom. In the silent night, the world spoke to him. He had learned that life was not a race, nor a pursuit to be one, but a rhythm, a dance with time, a symphony played out in seasons. The days of summer had been filled with energy and warmth, a time of growth and action. The autumn had brought moments of reflection, of letting go, of preparing for the winter's quiet. And now, In winter's embrace, he had found his stillness, his peace. The cycle was complete, but it was not over. Life would continue, as it always did. Spring would return, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, and Elias would welcome it, knowing that he had learned to appreciate the beauty of each phase, each moment. The quiet of the night grew deeper, and Elias felt a gentle weight settle over him, as if the world itself had exhaled and was resting in the comfort of its own existence. He closed his eyes and let the soft silence of winter fill his heart, letting go of all the fears, all the uncertainties that had once burdened him. In this moment, he was exactly where he needed to be. There was no more searching, no more striving. The world, the seasons, the cycles, everything was connected, and he was part of it. He no longer needed to seek, for he had found it all right here in the quiet rhythm of life. And as he drifted into a peaceful sleep that night, Elias smiled softly to himself. He had found his place within the vast, unbroken circle of existence. He had come to understand that life was not about achieving or becoming, but about being. The quiet of winter, with its stillness and its promise of renewal, had shown him this truth, and in this truth he was finally free.